As we're talking about sort of the early rock and roll, Little Richard, even the history that Robert embraced musically, which was an older style in many ways, kind of leads me to another artist I know you worked with. And I specifically wanted to bring this up because I've always maintained a belief that the Sex Pistols were a much better band than they're given credit for. I actually heard the Bollocks record after I had heard Little Richard, after I had heard Chuck Berry. So when I listen to Steve Jones guitar playing on that album as a younger man, I'm thinking, oh, this is a Chuck Berry record. You
All
know,
right.
this is a Little Richard record. So there was a musicality in that band that I think is overlooked. I mentioned that obviously because you had produced their first demo in '76 when the band was first starting.
Yeah.
Um, uh, you're probably the only person I can speak to besides them who could offer perspective. I mean, how well along were they as far as understanding
Well,
musicianship and the influences that were coming through?
um, yeah. I'll give a shout out here to Chrissy Hines because she's the person that called me up and said, "Hey, Chris, you got to come see this band at the 100 Club." Because Chrissy, she knew Vivian and Malcolm. She used to work at the shop, and I knew Chrissy long before the Pretenders. This would have been about 1950s, 1976. So I went along there, and it wasn't that packed. They were very aggressive, and the few people that were there, that some of them drifted off. So there were 15 people in the audience. There were about like six by the time they finished, and because they used to frighten people. This is before they were well known at all. They weren't known at all. I was quite impressed by very impressed by Johnny Rotten, as I knew him, and very impressed by Steve Jones because he seemed to break most of the strings on his guitar and he was still in tune.
Mm.
And I thought, well, if you're going to play this music, I can't think of a more effective way of playing. And I've been playing 20 years. Steve Jones had been playing about 1 year. So he had it down. He knew exactly what he wanted to do, and he did it really, really well. So, and I thought, well, nobody's going to come and see this band. People are frightened off by them. No wonder they're not doing anything. They're playing to 15 people in the 100 Club. So I said to Malcolm McLaren, so I said, the current wisdom in the music business is if you can put together a demo of three songs, three of your best songs, and take it to a record company, they'll listen to that and they might give you a deal. That is what I can do for you. And I found a studio that was cheap. I made Malcolm and Crown come up with the cash, which was my first mistake because I didn't want Malcolm McLaren, who seemed like a bit of an opportunist. So I'm not going to get stuck with the bill for this studio. So I made Malcolm McLaren. You're going to come up with well, it wasn't expensive. It can't be more than a couple of £100 for the whole day. If I'd have paid the bill, I would have owned the tapes.
Right.
So that's my first bit. I should have. I thought I was being really smart, but I wasn't smart enough. Anyway, that's a little humorous aside. But they were as good as gold. They came in the studio. We were all set up by about 11 o'clock. By about 5 o'clock that same afternoon, we'd finished three songs,
Mm.
and it basically got them the deal with EMI. Uh, we got people to listen to them. Um, I would meet people in the bar that were journalists for the Melody Maker and New Musical Express, and they would say, "Hey, Chris, you've got to be careful of your reputation because you've got a reputation in this business, and your name is associated with the Sex Pistols." So I said, "Well, what's the problem?" I said, "Well, they're terrible." So I said, "Well, that's interesting. Each to his own. When did you hear them?" "Oh, I haven't heard them, but they're terrible." So I thought, this is a wide open opportunity. I walked straight in and said, "I can do something here," and I did. So it was very satisfying, very satisfying. Um, and yeah, good luck to them. I'm still on good terms with them all,
Wonderful.
uh, including Glenn Matlock. who unfortunately doesn't feature that much on the Bullets, but who wrote most of the songs.
Mm, right, absolutely.
And
And songwriter.
my demos have got him playing the bass, and they sound totally different to the ones with Steve Jones playing the bass,
Right.
because it's more of a cohesive rhythm section. I actually prefer listening to that when you can hear the bass and the bass drum and the snare drum all separate instead of having to sort of listen hard.
Mm,
I call the Chris Thomas productions more like guitar soup because it's like lots of guitar overdubs, and the bass is just playing the lowest note of the guitar chord. If it's going along on an E, like the bass is going blah, 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 the same thing.
right. Right.
There's no sort of listening a lot as I did in those days to Motown and Stax and a lot of the R&B records, great records. You can hear the bass and the bass drum. You can hear all those. It's a different concept that they had to. That they like that sound. It wasn't my taste, but they did play well.
Mhm.
Good
Yeah.
drummer. Walcott's a good drummer,
Yeah.
and Den's a good songwriter and bass player.
Yeah. Like I said, I think the musicianship gets overlooked, and they're still playing, without John, but they're still
Yeah,
out doing
yeah.
gigs and doing what they do. So, more power to them. I'm almost embarrassed to ask you this question, but I have you here. So I feel remiss if I don't ask it because in the world of music journalism, there's always a lot of myths that get passed on from generation to generation. So please allow me to ask you this. And I'm not going to cut it. This is on the record. You're here. Did you ever record guitar for the Sex Pistols yourself?
No,
Okay.
no, I didn't. I was impressed with Steve Jones, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to work with him, so that it wouldn't make any sense for me to say, "Oh yeah, this band's got a great guitar player. I'm going to replace all his parts." That would have been like counterintuitive. I
Mm,
was interested in working with this guy who knew how to play the guitar for that very well for that genre. And you don't go to a new young band and say, "Okay, I'm going to produce you, but I'm going to like play all your parts now."
right.
They'd have hated me. um, and I actually, when the rumors first came out about me playing, I think because Chris Thomas was the producer and I'd worked with Chris Thomas, he produced my Hurt album.
Hmm.
Uh, and I'd just been on the road with John Cale, with Chris Thomas was on the keyboards. So I knew I played on a lot of Chris Thomas's productions, like Frankie Miller, people like that. So people assumed that I was Chris Thomas's first call for guitar if he had a project, and Steve Jones's rhythm guitar sound is not unlike my sound at that time. So I thought, oh well, I called up Malcolm McLaren and said, look, if you want to make a joint um, statement to the press saying that that's Steve Jones on the guitar, I'm sure Steve would appreciate it. And Malcolm McLaren's reaction was, nah, can't be bothered. They will think what other. So he was interested in not interested in any of that at all. The more trashy that people thought the Sex Pistols were, like the Monkees who had to have session guys, or the Bay City Rollers who had to have session guys, he didn't mind.
Mm,
So at that point, I thought that's the last time I think I ever spoke to Malcolm McLaren. I thought, well, I'm not from that little world that he's in, that world of being cute like that.
right.
So that's the end of it. And that's how the rumor grew. And I think Malcolm McLaren cultivated it. Even Steve Jones cultivates it for a joke. God bless him.
Yeah, fantastic player. Even then, even on that
Good
album.
rhythm player. Yeah.
And I
Well,
think,
they did the tracks with Paul Cook, Steve and Paul, bass, guitar and drums, and then he put the bass on afterwards, just echoing the low note of the guitar chord, and that's you gave him that sound. He would overdub guitar, rhythm guitar, and lead guitar. So on my demos, there's a minimum of that. There's no rhythm guitar overdubs. There's just a couple of lead guitar overdubs, which is how I liked it, sort of pared down. He had
Right.
such a full sound on the rhythm guitar that you didn't really need to double it. But Chris Thomas being Chris Thomas, he uh, he wanted to get the maximum out of it. He knew what it was. He was a brilliant producer, Chris Thomas. And of my albums, the one that he produced, the Hurt album, is the best sounding one that I ever did. Better than the ones that Mickey Most did, sound wise. No. So good on Chris Thomas and Steve Jones, the whole lot of them. They deserve their place in music history.
Mm.
I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a reason why that record still holds up. The songs are
Oh yeah,
there.
yeah.
You can grab as many headlines as you want, Malcolm, but the reality is the songs are there. Without the songs, there's
Oh,
nothing,
yeah,
nothing to care about, you know.
yeah.